My brother stole my inheritance after I paid his debts for years, so I took the house back and left him facing complete financial ruin. I'm a 29-year-old guy. And for as long as I can remember, I've been cleaning up after my younger brother, Kyle. It's like the role was assigned to me the day he was born. No discussion, no choice, just an unspoken expectation that I would be the responsible one, the steady one, the one who understood better. Even as kids, Kyle would break something, lie about it, then stare at me with those wide, terrified eyes until I stepped forward and said, "It was me." And every single time, my dad would sigh and repeat the same line, "You're the older one, learn to compromise." Back then, I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. Protect him, shield him, be the big brother he needed. That childhood pattern didn't stay in childhood. It grew fangs in adulthood. I still remember the first time Kyle asked me to help pay off his small credit card bill. I promised it was a one-time mistake. I wanted to believe him, so I paid it. But then came another bill, then a missed rent payment, then a loan he swore he'd repay, but conveniently forgot existed. "Bro, you know I've got you," he'd say, as if that made it better. And stupidly, I kept stepping in. Part of it was loyalty, part of it was habit. But mostly it was because my dad raised us on the idea that brothers protect each other no matter what. And while Kyle took that as a free pass to be reckless, I treated it like a rule carved into stone. Meanwhile, life kept moving. Our bills, responsibilities, long work hours. I managed it all quietly, while Kyle drifted in and out of our lives, like a storm that only hit when he needed something. And my dad, he was getting older, slower, coughing more often, forgetting things. I tried not to think too much about it. But lately his health had been slipping faster than either of us expected. And Kyle? Somehow he was drifting even farther away. I noticed the shift in my dad's health long before anyone else admitted it. His hands shook when he tried to hold his coffee, and some mornings he'd sit quietly on the edge of his bed, breathing like every inhale was a negotiation. I started, stopping by his place after work, bringing groceries, sorting his medication, making sure he ate something other than toast and tea. He'd chuckle weakly and say, "You don't need to fuss over me, son." But the gratitude in his eyes always told the truth. One night, while I was helping him organize his pills, he murmured, "Your brother still hasn't visited." I paused, swallowing the frustration rising in my throat. "He's busy, Dad." He gave me this tired smile. He's always busy when responsibility calls. There was no bitterness in his voice, just a kind of resigned sadness that cut deeper than anger ever could. As the weeks passed, hospital visits became our routine. I'd sit beside his bed, holding his hand while machines beeped steadily around us. Sometimes he'd drift into memories, talking about when Kyle and I were small. It's almost like he was trying to hold on to something slipping away. Then one evening, as the sun set behind the blinds, he squeezed my hand a little tighter. "Son, there are things we need to settle." I looked at him. "What things? The house, the savings, your future." His voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of what he was trying to say. "You've carried more than your share. Kyle, he's not ready for certain responsibilities." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded, feeling this strange mix of guilt and relief. He looked at me with eyes that were clearer than they'd been in days. "Come tomorrow morning," he whispered. "There's something I want to talk to you about, alone." The word hung heavy in the room, and that night, as I drove home, a sinking feeling settled in my chest. Kyle had been silent for weeks. When I walked into Dad's attorney's office the next morning, I wasn't prepared for how heavy the air felt. Mr. Alden, the family friend who handled Dad's legal matters for years, stood up the moment he saw me. "Your father wanted you to understand everything clearly," he said, guiding me to a chair. His tone wasn't dramatic, but something about it made my chest tighten. I cleared my throat. He said there were things we needed to settle. Mr. Alden nodded. He updated his will a few months ago. He wanted to make sure there would be no confusion after he was gone. Cold ripple went through me. "Okay, so what does it say?" He opened a folder, sliding a document forward. "The house goes to you. The savings will be split equally. And Kyle will receive a trust fund with restrictions." I stared at the paper, reading the lines twice, then a third time. A trust fund? It's not punishment, Mr. Alden said gently. Your father felt Kyle needed structure. He was worried that without safeguards, the inheritance would disappear or put him into more trouble. My throat tightened. I could practically hear Dad saying, "It's steady, honest, never unkind." I didn't want to take anything from him, I murmured. You aren't, the attorney replied. You're receiving what your father believed you earned through years of responsibility. There was a warmth in that validation, but also a sting guilt I couldn't shake. I kept thinking of Kyle, of how he'd react, how he'd accuse me of manipulating Dad. Mr. Alden must have sensed the storm forming in my head, because he leaned back and said, "People act strangely when money's involved. Keep these documents safe. And don't mention anything to Kyle until your father decides it's time." His eyes held mine for a moment, serious and knowing, and as I left the office, holding the sealed envelope, a sudden dread crept up my spine. Kyle hadn't called, texted, or visited Dad in weeks. Dad passed away quietly 2 weeks later. I was the one sitting beside him when it happened, holding his hand as the monitor flattened and nurses rushed in with soft, practiced urgency. There was no dramatic final speech, no grand confession. Just a gentle squeeze of his fingers. And then nothing. I remember staring at his still face, feeling like a piece of the ground beneath me had been kicked out. I called Kyle first, even though a bitter part of me wondered if I should. He answered on the third ring, sounding groggy. "What? Why are you calling so early?" I swallowed hard. "Kyle, Dad's gone." There was a pause, then a dramatic, shaky exhale. "I'll be there soon," he said. But he didn't show up for hours. Not until everything was already being handled. The funeral itself felt surreal. I spent the entire morning lining up the service, coordinating with relatives, greeting people as they walked in. Kyle, meanwhile, arrived in fresh clothes, red eyes, and an expression that suggested he had cried more than anyone else. People kept hugging him, whispering things like, "You were always his favorite, and stay strong, son." I said nothing. I just stood there, exhausted, numb, and strangely invisible at the burial. Kyle walked right up to the front like he'd been Dad's primary caretaker. He sniffled loudly, wiped his eyes, and accepted every sympathetic pat on the back. I didn't even know when he started calling Dad my best friend. He barely visited him. After the service, distant relatives started murmuring about the house and what your father intended. Kyle didn't hesitate. He spoke confidently, as if arrangements had already been made in his favor. "Dad told me not to worry," he said to someone. He promised everything was going to be taken care of for me. My heart dropped at those words. Later that night, when I returned home, I noticed the drawer where I kept the sealed will envelope was slightly open, and the envelope was no longer inside. I tore through the drawer 3 times, praying that somehow I'd misplaced it. But the space where the envelope had been was undeniably empty. My hands shook as I checked every corner of the room, every folder, every stack of papers. Nothing. And the worst part? The moment the panic settled in my stomach, a single thought came crashing into place. Kyle. He was the only other person who'd been in the house. He'd wandered around freely after the funeral, claiming he needed a moment alone. I'd thought he was grieving. But now that memory twisted into something ugly. The next morning, I marched into Mr. Alden's office. "The will is gone," I said, breathless. Before he could respond, his receptionist handed him a file. "Kyle Thompson dropped this off earlier. He said it's urgent." My blood ran cold. Mr. Alden opened the folder, scanned. The contents, then slowly looked up at MIS, wide jaw tightening. "This is a different will." "What do you mean different?" He turned the papers toward me. A new document, different formatting, different language, different date. And every ascent, including the house, was listed under Kyle's name. I felt my voice crack. This can't be real. Dad didn't sign this. Mr. Alden tapped the signature. "It looks off. The phrasing isn't how your father wrote. The timing just weeks before his health declined. It's all suspicious. But legally, we have to treat it as valid until proven otherwise." I felt like the room tilted, so he forged it. Mr. Alden sighed. "We can't accuse him without evidence, but it's deeply concerning." As if the universe wanted to twist the knife, My phone buzzed. A text from Kyle. Dad wanted me to have a fresh start. Hope there are no hard feelings, no explanation, no apology. It's just smug assurance. Hours later, a formal notice arrived at my door. Kyle had filed to take possession of the house. And attached to the notice, like salt in a wound, was a request for me to vacate the property within 30 days. My home. My father's home. And now, Kyle wanted me gone. I don't think anything prepares you for the moment you're forced to pack your life into cardboard boxes because of someone who shares your blood. Every item I picked up felt heavier than it should. My dad's old watch, faded family photos, the toolbox he taught me to use when I was 10. These weren't just things. They were pieces of him. And Kyle was taking them from me without a second thought. I tried calling him once. Just once, he answered with a sigh, like I was the one inconveniencing him. Look, man, he said, Dad wanted me to have the house. You need to stop making this weird. You stole the will, I whispered, voice shaking. He laughed. Actually laughed. You're delusional. Maybe you're just upset Dad trusted me more. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I took care of him, I said softly. Where were you? There was a pause just long enough for guilt to flicker, but he smothered it instantly. Whatever, dude. The court wants you out. Handle your drama somewhere else. Then he hung up. The humiliation sank in faster than the reality. Mutual relatives began calling me, not to ask how I was handling Dad's death, but to scold me for fighting over property and disturbing family peace. They had no idea what Kyle did. They didn't care to know. They believed the brother who showed up crying at the funeral, not the one who handled hospital nights, medical bills, and grief alone. Eventually, I had no choice but to leave. I moved into my friend Daniel's spare room, a cramped space with a single lamp and a mattress on the floor. That first night, lying on my back staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything finally crashed down. The exhaustion, the betrayal, the loneliness, and then, because the universe loves irony, opened my phone and saw Kyle's social media post, a picture of him posing inside my father's living room, newly furnished. Caption, finally getting my life together. It felt like a punch to the throat, and worse. Something in that photo didn't look right. I stared at Kyle's photo longer than I should have. At first, all I felt was rage, but then something in the background caught my eye. A folder, dark blue, worn at the edges. Sitting on the coffee table like it meant nothing. It looked exactly like the one Dad used to store important documents. The same folder I kept the real will in. My chest tightened. Daniel walked in and saw the look on my face. You okay, man? I pointed at the screen. That's my dad's document folder. Daniel leaned over. The one you said went missing. Yeah, I whispered. He didn't just steal the will. He stole the entire folder. A cold clarity washed over me. That was proof. Proof he'd taken something from my house after the funeral. Proof he'd been there long enough to tamper with documents. The next morning, I returned to Mr. Alden with the screenshot. He didn't even sit down before saying, "This is significant." What does it mean? I asked. He adjusted his glasses. I've been reviewing the will Kyle submitted. There are inconsistencies, wrong phrasing, odd formatting, and a witness signature belonging to someone I'm fairly sure is one of Kyle's friends. My stomach dropped. So it's fake. He raised a hand cautiously. Legally, we must prove it. But the signs are pointing there. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small stack of papers. Your father sent me messages in the months before he passed, all consistent with the original will. He never mentioned any late changes. I skimmed the printed text Dad talking about making sure you're protected. The house should go to the person who actually cares, and Kyle needs accountability. My eyes blurred. Mr. Alden leaned forward. We can build a case, but we need more. Financial records, proof of your support, evidence of Kyle's past debts, and, if possible, any trace showing your father intended the original distribution. I nodded, wiping my eyes. I have everything. Years of transfers, loan repayments. All of it. Placed a reassuring hand on the desk. Then, son, if this goes to court, Kyle won't just lose the house. He paused. He'll lose everything, for the first time since Dad died. I felt the smallest spark of hope, you said. I spent the next week gathering everything, every receipt, every transfer, every late-night message from Kyle asking for one more loan. The more I compiled, the angrier I became, not just at him, but at myself for letting it go on for so long. I'd always believed helping him made me a good brother, but looking at the evidence laid out across Daniel's tiny kitchen table, all I saw was a pattern of manipulation I had mistaken for loyalty. Daniel watched me sort documents into piles. Man, this is years of stuff. Yeah, I muttered. It's basically a financial biography of me being stupid. He shook his head. No, it's proof. And it was. Transfers for $300 here, $500 there. A $2,400 payment to clear his credit card. A $900 rent deposit just until he finds a job. Pages and pages showing a decade of enabling. Next. I met with neighbors who lived near Dad's house. One of them, Mrs. Turner, remembered seeing Dad sign paperwork with Mr. Alden months earlier. I brought him cookies that morning, she said. He told me he was updating his will. Looked relieved, actually. Her statement was gold. Meanwhile, I made one deliberate choice. I didn't tell Kyle a single thing, while I quietly built a case. Kyle was busy playing king of a house he didn't deserve. He hosted parties, loud ones. Videos popped up on social media showing people drinking in the living room, music blasting. Someone stumbling into the hallway where Dad used to hang his fishing photos. It made me sick. But something else happened too. The mortgage and property tax notices still in Dad's name began piling up. And without the assets being legally transferred, Kyle wasn't allowed to access the inheritance funds he thought he'd get. He was burning through money he didn't have. When Mr. Alden finally filed the formal inheritance dispute, the court immediately froze all estate assets for investigation, meaning Kyle couldn't sell the house. He couldn't take out loans. He couldn't touch a single cent. The quiet revenge had officially begun, and Kyle had no idea the storm forming right. Under his feet, the first signs of Kyle's panic came through. Barrage of late-night calls I didn't answer. At first, they were just missed calls stacked on my screen. But then came the voicemails. His voice strained, frantic, whispering like someone was standing behind him. Bro, call me back. Something's wrong with the bank. Another message followed minutes later. Dude, the mortgage company is saying something about a freeze. What did you do? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The court's freeze meant exactly what it sounded like. Kyle now had zero access to anything he believed he owned. No inheritance funds. No estate money. Not even the accounts he thought Dad left him. And without that financial cushion, reality hit him fast. Creditors began circling like vultures. Old debts he'd dodged for years suddenly resurfaced. His credit cards declined. Friends stopped lending him cash. The parties halted abruptly when he couldn't afford alcohol, let alone food for his guests. Then, one afternoon, showed up at Daniel's apartment, pounding on the door like it owed him something. When I stepped outside, he was sweating, hair disheveled, eyes wild. What did you do? He hissed. I folded my arms. This isn't about me. It's between you and the court. Bullshit. He snapped. You're sabotaging me because Dad trusted me more. Admit it. I stared at him calmly. A legal investigation isn't sabotage. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to worry about. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Word spread through the family quickly. Suddenly, cousins who defended him at the funeral started calling me, asking careful questions. Did Kyle really handle the paperwork? Why is the estate under review? He said you're trying to steal from him. What's going on? I answered only with the truth. The court will decide. That was enough to make them rethink everything. But the real moment came 3 days later. Kyle banged on my door again. This time holding a thick envelope official court lettering stamped across the front. His hand shook as he thrust it toward me. What is this? He shouted. I looked at the envelope. A summons for suspected forgery and fraud. The beginning of his downfall had officially arrived. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Sterile walls, polished wood, the faint smell of paper and old carpet. Kyle sat at the defendant's table fidgeting, tapping his foot so hard the entire bench vibrated. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not the smug brother who laughed when he took the house, but a man cornered by consequences he never thought would catch him. When the judge entered, the murmurs died instantly. Mr. Alden stood first, calm, steady, prepared. "Your Honor, we will show that the will submitted by Mr. Kyle Thompson is fraudulent." His voice carried with quiet confidence that made my chest tighten. The evidence came one piece at a time, slow, methodical, devastating. First, the handwriting analysis. An expert broke down every curve and stroke of Dad's signature, pointing out inconsistencies. "This is not the signature of the deceased." Kyle shifted, jaw, clenchinG. Next, witness testimony. Mrs. Turner spoke about the morning Dad signed the real will. "He told me he was relieved his affairs were settled, that his older son deserved the house." Her words landed like a hammer. Then came the financial trail. Stacks of documents showing years of me paying Kyle's debts, covering rent, bailing him out. The judge raised an eyebrow when Mr. Alden explained. "This demonstrates motive for Mr. Kyle Thompson to manipulate inheritance assets." Asterisk. Kyle finally snapped. "That means nothing," he shouted. "Dad changed his mind? He told me himself." The judge silenced him with a glare. "Do you have evidence of that?" Kyle stammered, I just know." But the final blow came from his own supposed witness, the man who signed Thigh, pulled up to the house early in the morning.
Ow.
The sky still a pale gray. A sheriff's car was already parked out front, lights off but presence unmistakable. My stomach twisted not from guilt, but from the surreal weight of the moment. This was finally happening. After months of betrayal, humiliation, and legal warfare, I was coming home. Kyle was already outside when I stepped out of my car, pacing in the driveway like a trapped animal. The sheriff stood beside him, arms crossed, voice firm. "Mr. Thompson, you have 10 minutes to gather essential belongings. You are no longer permitted on this property." Kyle spun around when he saw me. "This is T," he shouted, eyes red, voice cracking. "You stole this from me?" "Dad wanted me to have the house." I kept my voice steady. The court disagreed. He jabbed a finger toward the front door. "You manipulated everyone. You're just jealous I was Dad's favorite?" The sheriff stepped between us. "You need to collect your things. Now." Watching him stumble back inside with a trash bag felt unreal. He grabbed clothes, chargers, a few scattered belongings, nothing more. He kept muttering under his breath, rage and panic mixing into something pathetic. At one point he turned to me and whispered, voice trembling, "Please, I don't have anywhere to go." I felt something tug in my chest, an instinct to help, a reflex built from a lifetime of carrying his weight. But it faded. "I can't fix this for you," I said quietly. "Not anymore." When he walked out for the last time, he didn't look back. After the sheriff confirmed possession was officially returned, I stepped into the house. The air smelled faintly of stale alcohol and cheap cologne remnants of his parties. But beneath it, I could still sense Dad. The wooden floors he polished every spring, the walls he painted himself, the home he wanted preserved, not exploited. Relatives arrived throughout the day, each one wearing the same expression: guilt. "We were wrong about you," my aunt said softly. "Kyle fooled all of us." I nodded. I didn't need their validation, but it felt good to hear. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I stood at the front door of my father's door. My door? I turned the key. The lock clicked firmly into place. For the first time in years, it felt like I had reclaimed not just the house, but my dignity. The legal aftermath hit Kyle harder than even I expected. Forging a will wasn't just immoral, it was a felony. And once the judge reinstated the original inheritance, the court proceeded with the consequences. Overnight, Kyle went from pretending to be the new homeowner to facing thousands in fines, mandatory repayment of every dollar he accessed from the estate, and crushing legal fees he had no chance of covering. His bank accounts were frozen. His cards declined. His credit score collapsed like a house of cards in a storm. For the first time in his life, he had no backup plan. No one left to manipulate. Within weeks, his landlord issued an eviction notice. Kyle tried to argue, to cry, to explain, but the landlord, like the rest of us, had no emotional history with him. Unpaid rent was unpaid rent. When he walked out of that building with the same trash bag he'd left my father's house with, I felt a strange mix of sadness and clarity. This was what accountability looked like. And it wasn't pretty. Relatives who once pitied him now kept their distance. Nobody wanted to be associated with fraud charges. Nobody wanted to bail him out. The charm he'd used his whole life had finally run dry. One evening, as I sat in the living room, Dad's living room, quietly repairing a loose drawer handle he'd fixed years ago, my phone buzzed. A long message from Kyle filled the screen. "I'm sorry. I messed up. I need help. I don't have anyone else. Please answer." I sat there for a long moment, reading every word. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just calm. Then I did what I should have done years ago. I blocked the number. No dramatic speech. No parting blow. Just a clean, final severing of a cycle that had broken me more times than I could count. I placed the phone down, leaned back, and let the silence settle around me like a blanket. I didn't destroy my brother, he did. I just finally stepped out of the way.